Hey everyone, hello, welcome. I am Andrew, and this is
I'm
there we
Nicole.
go, all of Nicole there now from Gyeongsang National University as graduates from the Woosong TESOL-MALL program. And we've actually presented at all the workshops so far that have been done, these annual symposiums. So it's a very good experience, as well as our own workshops within our university, which are usually monthly, I believe. And with that said, let's get the share screen going and share sound as well, because that is important. Okay, so now this should be the correct screen if I have not messed up somehow. Okay, and get my favorite tool, the flashlight. Keeps it nice and safe feeling for me. Okay, so yeah, we're going to talk today about integrated approaches using student-generated content. And we have a quick little bit of rationale that we use to build all of our ideas that we're going to show off today. And yeah, we're going to start with that. So yeah, that's our lit review. Before talking about student-generated content, I want to first talk about content. Now, when it comes to content, there are two main groups. There's the producer and there's the consumer. So when a producer creates content, they have what they want to provide to the consumer. And usually you don't get to mess around with it. So here we have from 1985, Super Mario Bros., the first world, level 1, the infamous Goomba that many people often die on their first playthrough. But then, this is what the Nintendo wants the players to do. But what if the players want to make this different? Well, that's when the user-generated content comes in. And when it comes to user-generated content, the sky is basically the limit. And as you can see here, some users are a little on the cruel side and filled the entire screen with fire bars as an example of user-generated content. So this is what another person, a user, thought would be satisfactory for playing through. Other kinds of user-generated content, a lot of games are a good source of these. Modded communities, they see something in the game that they think could be done differently, so they make a modification to the game. And if you happen to hang around on Steam, then you can find a lot of mods. In fact, these are mods for Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, which is something we've talked about in the past. Now, student-generated content, we could think of it in the same way like user-generated content. There's the content that we provide to the students, but maybe if the students had their own say in the content, it could make them more engaged, right? So student-generated content, it could be, there's a huge variety of it. Like technically, if you tell the students to make an essay, that would be student-generated content. Or like any kind of assignment, they generate it. So it's student-generated content. But I want to talk more about some content where they really invest a lot and you give them a little more freedom to get into what they're interested in and to help them create their learning experience. There's a lot of evidence out there that student generated content gives more engagement because the students, they're investing their interest into a topic, so they're going to want to do it more, right? And in some cases, if you set it up right, it gives them awareness of an audience, which goes along with the investment. And yeah, it can let them be constructive if you give them the option to be so. Other benefits for this kind of student-generated content, students like it. You can increase interactivity between students using this kind of thing, which is one of the things we're going to really focus on. Higher levels of thinking, because if the students have to generate the content, for example, if you made the students make a report or something or a website to explain about a concept, then the students need to really invest their time and understand what the content is in order to produce their final product. And similarly, they're more critical and hold themselves to a higher expectation when you just give them the content to create for themselves. And that leads to self-assessment and or also peer assessment if they're doing some group type stuff. And they can be motivated sometimes, depending on the students, by SGC. And also when we combine that student-generated content with online situations, you can give so much control over to the students. They have all of the internet to help them create their content, and that can be quite motivating for the students. Something that comes up with student-generated content in the literature is workload. And some people see it as, oh, you can reduce the workload because the students make all the content. So if you wanted to have an instructional video, you could make your students make that video and give it to the students next semester, is one of the studies that we read about. And same, some chemists made 3D models. The students made the models of the chemical structures that they were interested in. It means the professor doesn't need to do that. The students can find the ones they're interested in and model them. And yeah, peer feedback, if you're doing forums or things like that, the students can help correct each other's errors by either modeling correct language for themselves or whatever else they're doing. And that means the educators don't necessarily need to spend as much time giving that kind of feedback if the students give it to each other already. Others have concerns about increased workload. So if you imagine there's a situation where an error goes unchecked, and then the students all propagate that error over and over again. If we don't intervene with that, then it could get a little out of hand. But what do I want to say about that? If you have some kind of rating system, the students rate each other's correctness or verify the quality, that can help. But just, yeah, keep an eye on them and things will be fine. Other concerns, scaffolding is important, is something that comes up a lot. If you build up the students, they're gonna do a better job. Yeah, copying and pasting errors over and over again. Another thing that's very important, and it's just every single time, you need to make sure that the students know the technology that you want them to use. You can't just assume that they know how to press all the buttons and everything will work out. Spend a little time to give them tutorials on the tech if you're using it with them, like how to use a wiki could be an example. You need to teach them. Or if you're using a video program, teach them a little bit of how to use that so that they don't spend all their time trying to learn the technology instead of making content. And then a final concern would be privacy online. Like if you're making something, if the students are making stuff online, it could be open for everyone in the entire internet to see, which obviously brings up privacy concerns. So focusing on some safe harbors is highly suggested when doing any kind of online work really for students. Okay, enough about student-generated content for a moment. And we want to combine that with a couple other approaches. First being integrated skills approach. So this is basically taking multiple skills and using them at the same time, just kind of weaving them together in some way to promote language learning. And yeah, if you spend time using multiple skills at the same time, then the students can work on multiple skills at the same time. So it's time efficient. And usually you can apply those things across multiple different skills. If they learn one thing in like speaking, it can help with the other skills as well. And integrated skills approaches have more like of an authentic feeling, since usually in order to communicate, you need at least two skills: listening or speaking, reading, writing, or speaking, reading, or whatever you need, right? You need two skills. So integrated approaches will be more authentic. And because of that authenticity, the students will be more motivated or interested or confident and maybe less stressed in an integrated skills approach. Maybe it feels less scary to them. Okay, and one final thing to combine all these things together is the 4 strands approach. Now, we already heard a little bit about pollination with our vocabulary presentation earlier. But here he is again. Pollination came up with this approach, the 4 strands approach, which says that teaching language can be taught by focusing on 4 specific areas: the meaning-focused inputs, meaning-focused outputs, language focus, and fluency. Those are the 4 strands. So meaning-focused input is exposure to the target language for comprehension, just for the comprehension part. And similarly, meaning-focused output is creating language to express themselves. The students create language. So as the idea, the words say, meaning-focused is about creating meaning, not about the accuracy of the grammar for these 2 strands. Language focus is where you can concentrate on accuracy, whether you're teaching vocabulary on that day, or speaking, or listening, or a particular grammatical pattern. That's where the language focus comes in, according to the 4 strands approach. And finally, fluency is to help students use language faster. And kind of the opposite of ZPD, we want to be not I+1, but I-1, according to Nation, for fluency. And one thing that Nation really stresses about 4 strands is they're not separate entities. You can mix them together and have like meaning focus, in output, and fluency together at the same time. You can mix them together. They don't need to be separate. It's just a way of thinking about what you're teaching to the students at a given moment. Okay, now let's get into combining student-generated content with integrated and 4 skills. So this is the big part where all of our activities come together that we're going to show you very soon. So student-generated content, you can combine this with integrated approaches and 4 strands. And it's actually very interesting with the result. Basically, you could make activities or projects or whatever kind of assignment you want, where a student's output could become another student's input, and then that input could become a new output through another student, which is the big thing we're going to do here. So a bit of recombination of one idea to become another. So for example, if a student does a speaking thing for a product, then that speaking becomes another student's listening, and then that student's listening you could change into a writing or another speaking or something. And here is my very sophisticated diagram of this process. Now, a couple things we could add to the diagram could be an initial input from the teacher. Go into here, like that. So you give some sort of little seed for them to grow on, and then they use that to make an output, product 1. And then that product 1 is now an input for this student B, which is then an output for another product. And you could continue this on for as long as you want, really, though it could get really messy. But yeah, that's kind of the main basis to this whole thing that we're going to show off in just a moment. But first, I need to talk about this, Flipgrid. This is an application that we used for basically every single one of our activities that we're showing. Flipgrid, and here is a link to Flipgrid. Basically, this is a free video-based recording and storage site. And yeah, you can do a lot of things with it. You can have videos shared between peers. Whoever's within the Flipgrid can post videos there. You could have peer interaction through text comments, kind of similar like YouTube comments. They can type a comment at the bottom of a student's video, or they could make response videos where they see a video and then they make a video in response and make kind of a thread of videos. There's moderation within it. So for example, if you wanted, you could have all the videos private until approved by the educator, or if there's some comments, you could also moderate them. So if you want to keep things 100% safe, you can moderate everything. There's also privacy through moderation. So for example, if you want a video where only the producer of the video, the student, and the instructor see that video, you could set up the Flipgrid to do that. There's also reporting. Reporting would be kind of flagging some content. For example, if a student makes a mistake or something and they don't want their video to be seen anymore, they can report it and it will remove it from the Flipgrid. And it also informs the instructor that something has been reported. There's actually a bunch of recording options in Flipgrid. You could use the camera, like just the camera and face, and do something like that. There's voice-only recording. You can annotate on a like a little whiteboard inside of there. They have a bunch of little stickers that you can play with. You can screen record on it these days. And also you can upload videos to the Flipgrid and just do it that way as well. And finally, and most importantly, Flipgrid is a safe harbor. Basically, students must be added through either a Google Classroom, if you're using that as your learner management system. Then if they're not part of your class, they cannot join. You could make teacher-made logins. If you like making lots of logins, you could do that. Or you could use specific domains to limit who can join. And the students must have a code to join a topic. So you give them the code, and then they can join the Flipgrid group and make whatever the content is. So now we're going to move on to our specific examples, our specific activities. And for that, I will hand it over to Nicole.
Yeah.
And I'll go
We're going to roll.
Your foreground now.
We're going to, yeah, your background, the foreground. Okay. So yeah, we basically took the idea of student-generated content, integrated approach, and 4 skills, and we kind of stuck them together to make a bunch of activities and assignments for students. So I'm going to jump in and introduce some of those. I'm going to start with our biggest one that we have been using as our final project with our classes, and we call this the 4 skills project. And the purpose of this, again, combine the 4 strands and integrate it to the approaches. It also, we wanted to give the students both like natural made for English speakers English exposure and non-standard English exposure. They get to hear our natural accents all the time because we talk a lot. So, but they don't really have great understanding of each other's accents. So that's why we kind of want non-standard as a focus as well when we do this project. We also divide this one into 2 parts so that the students can not get overwhelmed with all the cognitive load, and to give them time to complete both parts of the assignment. Materials-wise, you need some sort of learner management system. We used Google Classroom for ours. You need some sort of video hosting site, and we use Flipgrid for all of this. And we also brought authentic text for our purposes here. So let's jump in. How does this work? So procedure. The first part works like this. We give the students an initial reading input, and every student was assigned a different text. We chose to do our topic as travel resorts because it kind of meshes with our textbook very well. And so we gave them authentic authentic like text about resorts. And we modified these lightly using LexTutor to make sure the reading level was the same for all of the readings, and they were about the same length. So there's some slight editing to them. But the students took this reading, and after identifying key information, they had to produce a spoken output. So we're getting some reading output and some reading input and speaking output. We did spend time teaching them how not to plagiarize, so that could be a useful thing to scaffold into your assignments. And yeah, so reading input became a video advertisement for spoken outputs. And this was shared on Flipgrid publicly to the other students, so they would all be able to watch each other's assignments. Then in the next day of class, that's when the inputs sort of kind of merge, and we had that video they produced become a listening assignment for their classmates. So they had to watch their classmates' videos and use that to create the next part of their project. We chose not to assign videos to students and let them pick any video that they liked, whichever one inspired them the most or was the easiest for them to complete the next step of their assignment. Didn't matter too much to us. But so they watched, they found information, and then they had to transform that information into a written output. And they did that by writing a travel review where they pretended they visited that travel resort. So this was submitted in the LMS, and we kept this private so that no one would be like, oh, they thought my resort was terrible. So we avoided that. We also added a small comparison section, so we encouraged the students to watch multiple videos. So we had them add a sentence or two saying, oh, the resort I picked it because it was cheaper than resort B. So you can add some requirements to force them to watch multiple videos. Is there anything else I need? And that's kind of how that assignment worked. Like, reading input became a spoken output, which they then used as a listening input to make their final written output. So all of the main areas were covered in this project. Now, I have an example for you here. This is a student-made video. I'll try to play it. Hopefully the volume will be loud enough. If not, I have screenshots, so don't worry. Oh,
that's odd.
It worked last night. Okay, video's not working. That's why I have screenshots. All right, so this was a actual student video that was spoken output, and here was a written output generated from the other student's video. Two different students made both of these. Andrew's computer is different than mine. Where's stuff I want? So you can kind of see that some of the key information from this video made it into the review. For example, it's really big. It's really big. The price here got moved in price there. The location made it here as well, and the name, obviously. Other information also did make it in, but it was harder to find screenshots to show that. So you can kind of only show in the pink. Another thing we do to prevent plagiarism in our assignment here is we make the students include vocabulary words. So if you're wondering what these underlined things are, it's vocabulary from the textbook. It helps them not plagiarize a lot because it forces them to rewrite things to meet requirements. That's why they're underlined. So yeah, the spoken thing became a written thing. There are variants for this as well. You could change the topics. You could extend it longer. With a different class, we had a infomercial version where we had the students actually generate the initial writing output as well. We had them write a forum post, like they were on Facebook or Reddit or something, with a general complaint like, oh, it's too hot, I can't sleep. Or my neighbors are always smoking and the smoke comes into my window. And those outputs, that writing, was assigned to different students who had to use that as their reading and create a infomercial for some sort of solution. For example, one of them came up with a plant-based window air filtration system, which honestly I wish really existed. And then back to the similar thing, that video, that spoken output, became a listening input, and they had to watch each other's videos and write a product review. Like, oh, I bought the magic sleeping pill, and instead of helping me sleep, it killed me. Would be a sort of thing that would come out from a student. So you can, using the structure, you can do a lot of different things. This variant was really good because it's a lot more creativity. There's a lot more abstraction between inputs. And there's even more student-generated content. But as a downside, it takes longer. You need to spend an additional day getting that initial writing input. You don't get that like made for native speakers reading as well. And you need more scaffolding on how to write infomercials and things. So yeah, any sort of variant will require scaffolding. But yeah, that was our biggest one and the most complicated. They don't always have to be that complicated. A lot of our earlier activities were a lot shorter and just kind of were based around the activities in their textbook and slightly modifying those to use the students' materials. So for example, there is a weather unit followed by a planning unit in our textbook. So these have similar target language, so we kind of stuck them together. And we had the students, well, I'll tell you, first we needed this material here. We had the students start with a sample weather forecast that they had to watch, and they did a quick close script to get an example. And then using that example script, they generated their own weather forecast video. Most of the students just recorded directly in Flipgrid, thanks to stickers and the way Flipgrid can let you like hide your whole screen. But you could, a few elected to do it in other programs and upload. But yeah, so their listening example helped them make their spoken output, which was visible on Flipgrid for everyone to see. And then in the second part, they watched each other's weather forecasts, found the important information, and generated a role play where two people tried to make plans around the weather. So here's, let's see if this one will work.
Maybe try switching to mouse.
Nope.
Okay.
Well, that's fine. That's why I put the picture as well. It worked last night. I don't know why. But anyway, we had them tell us whose video they watched so we could go back and check that they actually watched. But you could see here, the student said, oh, I want to take a walk. Should we go together? And oh, that's great. But haven't you seen the weather? And like, it's going to rain. It's pouring thunder and lightning, as the student could hear. And oh, well, how about tomorrow? Tomorrow's sunny. But we got yellow dust, so it's probably not a great idea as well. And then, oh, okay, let's go next week. So you can see that the students did have to listen because there's no dates on this one. And I don't know what a sad face necessarily meant, but apparently it was yellow dust. So in this way, the students' weather forecast became the basis for this role play here. Another one is very simple. We just took that directions listening activity where I'm sure many people have had a textbook where they just have a map and you play the CD and, all right, start here, go straight, and people fall. We just made the students come up with the directions for us. Instead of playing the book CD, the students made their own. So in this case, you'll probably need some sort of map software or drawing software to give the students, as well as Flipgrid. We actually had students draw directly in Flipgrid later, and that worked just as well as having them use Paint. But yeah, the students marked the starting points. They recorded directions, themselves speaking. They didn't tell in the video where their target was. And then again, they were uploaded for their classmates to see. And then the students watched each other's videos and reported in the Google Classroom which student's video they watched and where they ended up. So they'd come and they'd watch these and they'd be, okay, follow the directions and then to the classroom and say, oh, we ended up at the Burger King. So instead of, again, just using the textbook, the students made the content that they then listened to. And they tend to enjoy it, I think.
You had a good time making maps.
The maps were very creative and very cute. They really love using these stickers, as you can see. And the last example I have here was student-generated comparisons. And this is a really, really broad one. You can do the created output in many, many different ways. Like we had the students use role plays, but you could have had them do a written diary. They could have wrote an essay. They could just do a monologue. All sorts of options for how you could have the students create the input/output. And this was for comparisons. So the students would, use their critical and organizational thinking to use comparative language. Again, you need Flipgrid or an LMS. And again, usually in 2 parts because it's just easy. Students learned the content. We had them use shopping, and they used that material to create an output, which was, again, short role play, where they discussed what they bought, where they bought it, and how much it cost. And then we had a plethora of student-generated content when we did this one, so we picked our favorite ones, and we shared those ones with the students. They completed a table to fill out information, and then wrote comparison sentences about their writing. So speaking, listening, writing. And these unfortunately aren't going to play.
This one will play.
This one might play, but
I don't know why.
Hey, look, I bought something.
What did you buy?
Laptop.
Oh, where did you buy the laptop?
I bought this in internet.
How much is this one?
It's $500.
Oh,
there's a missing line where he finishes, you got ripped off.
Yeah,
I don't know why it won't play. This was one of my favorites from that class. It just was very funny. But you can see, right, what did they buy? Oh, it was a laptop. Where? Online. And how much? It was 500. And it could be loading issues. I'm not sure. But then, they have a second listening, which won't play despite testing it last night. And those could be used as here as well. And then you can give them some sample words of patterns for them to use, and they can generate their comparisons. So those were some projects we used based around combining student content, integrated skills. So they use multiple skills in one project, and the 4 skills, especially the input and output parts. Admittedly, working in fluency into these assignments is a little tricky without forcing them to record multiple times, and grammar form, I think, better fits in other places in a classroom as well. So those are some example projects. I'm gonna back off and let Andrew take over again.
The foreground.
I'm gonna shuffle to the background.
Okay, so we've run these through several semesters now of online teaching, and we've seen a bunch of different things that happen as a result. And first, if you give a clear standard for students to work towards, you get better results. It's I mean, it should be pretty obvious, but yeah, if you give a good example, then the students will give you a better product than better than the example usually. And then if you ask them for that as a new example, you just keep giving them better and better stuff. Another thing is students use each other as standards. A lot of those things that we showed, the videos, the students can see each other's work. So there are times where they will see someone's work and they go, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to redo my work and make it better because that's really neat. I want to do like that instead. So it helps everybody kind of increase in their level. And yeah, the early completers, people who finish their work quicker, they kind of set some benchmarks for everyone else's own work. So if a very strong student happens to finish first, then usually everyone else will be much stronger, or they have a better idea of what's going on because they have more examples to look at. Or if in some cases, if a student did something very incorrectly, they missed the point completely, then that gives the students a chance to think, wait a minute, was this what we're supposed to do or not? And then they actually come and say, well, so this student put like this, is this what we're supposed to do? Back inside the Zoom call, and then it gives us a chance to be like, no, not like that. And then give more explanation because the students pointed out that something was not understood. So that's some of those observations. Another thing is students tend to gravitate towards the inputs that they created that make it easier for them to complete their next output. So usually this kind of verifies the quality of work. Like in the project, the 4 Skills project, if someone makes a very organized and very clear advertisement for their travel resort, often that is the name of the resort that you will see the most inside of the reviews later on. And also you can tell from view counts which ones are the most popular among students.
And it could be the best language as well as just the best looking.
Yeah, it could just be very pretty. They tend to also like to click on ones with pretty pictures. Or yeah, if the language is best in there, they'll also choose that. Because yeah, they want to have a good score on their next output, so they find the ones they can understand the best or like the best or are inspired by the most. And then it also gives the students kind of a chance to interact online with their peers because they interact with another student's work, or if you have them typing comments to each other below videos, the original author of the video can check it out and see what the other students thought of it. And it helps students connect because sometimes they have some similar idea and they're like, I'm not alone after all, even though they're in their little rooms by themselves all around the world, all around the country. Now, post-pandemic, how can we bring these kinds of activities back into our physical classrooms after? So these were pretty tailor-made for online teaching. But if you have some good internet and strong devices and access to an LMS, you could replicate them inside of a classroom. Also, just in general, you could store stuff on Flipgrid for free, which is nice. You could also kind of swap between the physical and digital spaces in some cases. If, for example, an outbreak flares up and you were physical and now suddenly you're back online, then these kinds of projects, they'll work just great.
Yeah. Or you could have like the presentation part happen live in the classroom, and then they could do their like written response on the digital homework section or something.
Yeah, which gets closer to the flipped classroom models and stuff like that, where if they make their outputs out of class, and then if they come into class, they can check out each other's inputs and kind of talk to each other about those inputs and then make another output again outside of class. You could do that kind of approach and flip it a bit, or at least make it hybrid. And then finally, there are some things that hopefully everyone's discovered from all this online teaching that are just better than what we were doing in the physical classroom before. So just take those things and bring them into our face-to-face classes. Like most students seem to have smartphones, tablets, or laptops, or some kind of mobile device. So why not take advantage of those things inside of our classrooms? And with that, I think that is our stuff, which brings up questions.
I went a little faster.
Oh, we finished right on time, didn't we?
Oh no, we're right on the end.
Yeah. All right, questions. Anything? Questions, comments? I like those. Mentioned 4 strands of English speaking. Could you explain how fluency strand helps students learn language faster? The idea behind the fluency strand of Pollination, it could actually be any of the language skills between listening, speaking, reading, or writing. You could have all of them with fluency. But his idea is if the content that you are making the students work with for fluency is lower, like slightly lower than their level, then it's easier for them to do, so they can do it faster. And that would improve their fluency.
And they should do it a couple times.
And then, yeah, you can.
They should, like, the repetition is a big part of the fluency strand.
Yeah.
Admittedly, our projects don't spend a lot of time on the fluency strands because, I don't know, fluency is, I find it the hardest one to try to do because it really just kind of comes down to make them repeat it a couple times and do it again and get faster at doing it. And that's kind of boring to do in the classroom, and the students don't usually enjoy it. So I tend to just kind of hope that they're trying because we did all video projects, we kind of hope and assume that they're doing multiple takes. So in the fluency part, they're practicing when they want to get the best take of their products.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I hope that gets in there.
Okay, next up,
do we police student feedback? Thankfully, I haven't had too much problems with students being inappropriate to each other. They've been mostly super positive towards each other, like, wow, your video was so cute. But I would, it's a thing to be careful of. And at least on the Flipgrid part, that's kind of where that report button could also be handy.
Yep.
Like if another student notices somebody said something rude, it's very quick and easy for a student to flag it and then for you to just remove it. It would be a thing to consider.
Yeah.
All right, and then getting students on Flipgrid is pretty easy.
Yeah.
I would, especially if you go about it through Google Classroom, you just have to go to Flipgrid and there's like a integrate to classroom button. And if you just press that button and select your Google Class, it just directly pulls the list. And those students automatically all have access. Alternatively, just using the email domain is even easier because then it just is like, oh, you can set it to be even just something vague like @Gmail. And as long as students have a Gmail, they can jump in
and the code.
Using the correct code, which is the main thing.
Yeah, one thing to watch out for is it defaults to certain @, whatever those are called. Email domains. So if they join with Naver and you don't have Naver set because it's not default, they can't join. So you got to make sure that you have like Naver and Daum and stuff added to the domain list.
That's only if you choose the domain list. If you use Google Classroom, it does not care what email domain. It just syncs the list to the Flipgrid.
Yeah.
So it's very quick and easy. I've never messed with the individual teacher-made logins.
Yeah, we haven't had to.
I teach adults. I don't want to make logins for each of them. They're 20 years old. They can do that.
Second part.
Second
How
part.
long does it take to create the resources? The
Ah.
maps? The students, it depends how into the maps they get or how into making their first resource. Some of them will finish their like first outputs usually in like 10 minutes. They just scribble a map together and go. Others will take like 20 minutes because they're like drawing trees with lots of detail. Some of them are actually works of art. So yeah, it depends on the students, but usually if there's like a set due date for the input and then a set due date for their next input, they'll hit those.
Yeah, we often would do it over 2 classes. So like
Yeah.
one class, they would make their map video and make their directions. And then the next day when we came and we did the planning assignment, the students would then, they had the whole week to create their output that would they'd be used in the next week. So most of the projects have a part 1, part 2,
Mhm.
because they were divided over 2 classes to make sure they had sufficient time to make the inputs and stuff.
Did I get all the questions so far here? So policing, 4 strands there. Okay, good. Anything else?
I think that's all of them so far. Yeah, and if you want a direct answer, I think most students finish within 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's typical for the small things. The projects are usually they take longer.
Projects take longer, but they're bigger.
Yeah, they're supposed to take longer. But the little activities, I'd say about half an hour is the highest. If they're taking longer than that,
They're probably not using a computer.
yeah. Though you can do Flipgrid and stuff on mobile devices and stuff as well. So,
yeah.
Which is a nice thing about it. Has it actually reduced your workload?
That's a hard question because we kind of jumped into using this right away.
Yeah. I don't know what the reality is.
I think honestly the thing that reduced workload the most was just rubrics.
Yes.
We swapped. Google Classroom has rubrics built in, so we've been using those.
Yeah, they're very nice.
But we've been using this since we started online classes pretty much, so it's hard to say for sure how it affected our workload.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to in-person, I think it might be a little more than in-person classes, but that's just, I think, because of the completely different way those 2 environments work. It feels like more, even if it maybe isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Screen fatigue is the biggest problem. Yeah, I think that's my comment so far.
Yeah, we don't have to be on share screen anymore. Let's get out of here.
Oh, are we on share screen first?
There we go.
All right, I guess that's it then.
Yeah, unless there's any final questions for our last 2 minutes here. If not, we can pass it off to the next person.
Yeah. Thank you all for your great questions and attention.
Yes.